Shaurn Thomas was exonerated and freed from a life sentence in 2017 after spending 24 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit. He was awarded a $4.1 million payout for his wrongful incarceration, but he went down the wrong path and committed the very crime he had been proven innocent of. The incident in question took place in January of 2023 when Thomas fatally shot his girlfriend's friend, 38-year-old Akeem Edwards, over a $1,200 drug debt. Edwards had failed to settle out for some cocaine that Thomas had given him to sell, and in late 2024, Thomas pleaded guilty to third-degree murder, conspiracy, and gun charges, seemingly in disbelief over the defendant's choice to risk his hard-won freedom. The judge admonished Thomas for squandering his future and fortune over a trivial amount of money. In February of 2025, he was sentenced to 33 to 66 years in prison, which means that he may very well spend the rest of his life behind bars. Number 24. Alec Maternowski. Alec Maternowski went from being one of Wisconsin's top high school football players to landing a high-paying job as a celebrity fitness coach and garnering a social media following of 1.2 million and counting. But the 29-year-old's seemingly endless upward climb came to a brief halt in the spring of 2025, following his arrest in Miami for domestic violence. According to court documents, Maternowski was arrested shortly after midnight on Monday, March 31st. At the scene, officers spoke with his girlfriend, who denied allegations that she had punched and hit Maternowski. During their investigation, police discovered that the two already had a pending domestic violence case from just 2 months earlier. Based on their findings, they decided to arrest Maternowski on suspicion of aggravated domestic battery by strangulation. Authorities seized his semi-automatic handgun, and he was ordered to have no contact with the victim while the case was ongoing. Records show that the case was closed a month after Maternowski's arrest, with no action being taken against him for the felony charge. Number 23. Young Philly. British rapper and YouTuber Andres Felipe Valencia Barrientos, better known to his fans as Young Philly, landed in legal hot water in September of 2024 when he was accused of forcing himself on a woman while touring in Australia. According to prosecutors, Barrientos assaulted a female victim in her 20s at his hotel room after performing at a nightclub in the Perth suburb of Hillaries. He was arrested in Brisbane and extradited to Perth, where he faced 4 counts of 3 counts of assault and 1 count of impeding the victim's breathing by applying pressure to her neck. Barrientos was out on bail when he caught an additional case in November for driving 96 miles per hour along a Perth highway. He pleaded guilty to reckless driving in December, but the assault case remains ongoing. The beleaguered musician was originally told to expect the case to go to trial within 2 months of his arrest, but the predicted waiting time has multiplied nearly tenfold following his arrest in June of 2025 on additional charges stemming from a separate incident. He now faces 6 counts, 3 counts of assault occasioning bodily harm, and 1 count of strangulation, and proceedings are expected to begin in July of 2026. Barrientos pleaded not guilty to the charges and continues to maintain his innocence. Number 22. Tom Girardi. Tom Girardi established himself as a big shot attorney back in the 1970s when he became the first lawyer in California to win a more than $1 million judgment in a medical malpractice case. He went on to litigate in numerous major cases, including an infamous lawsuit against Pacific Gas and Electric that won a $460 million settlement for water contamination victims and inspired the movie Erin Brockovich. Along with Girardi's courtroom victories came an enviable income, affording lavish vacations, exotic cars, and private jets. He lavished the women in his life with expensive jewelry and gifts while also using his money to hobnob with powerful politicians. At some point, however, Girardi's spending spiraled out of control. By 2020, clients had started to complain about not receiving settlements that they had won in court, and they became increasingly angry as they watched Girardi and his much younger wife, Erica, show off their exorbitant lifestyle on the reality series The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Until that point, Girardi had avoided accountability for past allegations of wrongdoing. This time, investigators uncovered evidence that he had misused his client's settlement funds, including $3 million that was meant for surviving widows and orphans of plane crash victims. Some people never saw a single penny of their award, while others agreed to settle out for a mere portion of what they were owed because they needed the money, and it was better than nothing. After being disbarred in 2022, Girardi was indicted on federal charges in California and Illinois for swindling his victims out of an estimated $18 million. By then, the octogenarian was suffering from dementia requiring round-the-clock care. The prosecutors forged ahead with the case, resulting in a 7-year federal prison sentence. Girardi, who's now 86 years old, began serving his time in July of 2025 despite ongoing controversy over his housing situation and whether his medical needs can be accommodated behind bars. Number 21. Peter Chadwick. From the outside looking in, 46-year-old Chi Cho, QC, Lim Chadwick lived an ideal existence as the stay-at-home wife to her multimillionaire husband and college sweetheart, Peter Chadwick. But the disturbing truth about the couple's seemingly picture-perfect marriage began to surface in October of 2012 when QC vanished from the family's Newport, California mansion without a trace. The next day, Peter Chadwick dialed 911 and claimed that a painter he had hired, named Juan, had murdered QC and kidnapped him. Afterward, he placed a call from San Diego, which is located roughly 90 miles from the couple's home, and said that Juan had forced him to dispose of QC's body in Mexico. Authorities did not buy Chadwick's story, and he was arrested that day on suspicion of QC's murder. A week later, QC's body was found in a dumpster at a local gas station. She had been bludgeoned and strangled to death after sitting in jail for 2 months. Chadwick bonded out for $1 million. He regularly attended his court appearances for 2 years before vanishing in January of 2015, leaving he and QC's 3 sons in the care of a relative. Chadwick had told family members that he was heading to Seattle, but his whereabouts remained unknown until August of 2019, when investigators tracked him to the Mexican city of Cholula. During his more than 4 years at large, Chadwick had drifted from one town to the next while working ordinary jobs. He moved on when his already conspicuous presence drew additional, unwanted attention that he believed would get him caught, and he was about to flee Cholula when the authorities finally apprehended him. Chadwick pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. He's required to serve 85% of his sentence, which means that he could see freedom again after as little as 12 years. Number 20. Peggy Ann Fulford. Peggy Ann Fulford bilked millions of dollars out of at least 4 professional athletes while pretending to be a financial advisor, including former NBA stars Dennis Rodman and Travis Best, and NFL athletes Ricky Williams and Lex Hilliard. She convinced her victims, who considered her a close friend, that she was a Harvard graduate who had studied law and business before hitting it big on Wall Street with savvy real estate investments. None of this was true, however, and Fulford's targets remained largely oblivious while she drained their accounts and treated herself to cars, jewelry, airline tickets, and other lavish expenditures. By the time the authorities caught up with her in 2016, much of the victim's money was gone. In November of 2018, Fulford pleaded guilty in federal court to interstate transportation of stolen property. The judge sentenced her to the maximum term of 10 years behind bars and ordered her to reimburse her victims to the tune of $5.7 million. There's no parole in the federal justice system, but Fulford nevertheless tried finding a way to shorten her punishment. When the COVID-19 pandemic struck in 2020, she requested passionate release due to her age, which was denied. The following year, she argued that her guilty plea should have reflected her willingness to take responsibility for her actions and should have therefore resulted in a lighter sentence. This motion was also denied, but Fulford ultimately achieved early release and was freed from prison in late 2023 at the age of 65. Number 19. John Broadhurst. In December of 2016, emergency dispatchers in Staffordshire, England, received a call from multi-millionaire property developer John Broadhurst, who said that he had found his girlfriend dead as a donut at their home in the village of Kinver Officers arrived to find the battered body of 26-year-old Natalie Connolly, who had suffered more than 40 injuries. Broadhurst claimed that Connolly's death was the accidental result of rough intimacy that the two had engaged in while drinking and using drugs. While there was no evidence to show that the couple engaged in consensual BDSM activities, prosecutors accused Broadhurst of snapping and killing Connolly in a rage during one of these sessions, then leaving her to die at the bottom of a staircase. In court, Broadhurst admitted to manslaughter by gross negligence by leaving Connolly alone in her injured state and failing to call for help earlier in a situation where he should have known she was at risk of dying. His defense attorney argued that he didn't think Connolly would sustain serious harm. Broadhurst was ultimately cleared of murder, and in December of 2018, the judge overseeing the case sentenced him to 3 years and 8 months in prison for the manslaughter charge. Number 18. Freddie Young. Attracted to the low real estate prices in America's blighted Rust Belt, 45-year-old Australian property developer Greg McNichol began buying up apartment buildings in Detroit in hopes of turning a profit. His business aspirations came to a screeching halt in May of 2011 when he was shot dead at one of his properties while attempting to evict a 20-year-old woman for unpaid rent. Police identified the gunman as the tenant's father, 63-year-old Freddie Young, who had encountered a small fortune of his own after winning $1.6 million in the state's lottery just months earlier. Witnesses recalled seeing Young pulling up to the complex in his vehicle, pulling a gun and shooting McNichol at close range. The bullet struck a major artery in McNichol's pelvic area, and he died from his injuries after clinging to life just long enough to make a 911 call. Young told a different story, initially claiming that he didn't even realize he was holding the gun until it discharged. Following his arrest for murder, his defense attorney argued in court that Young had acted in self-defense. The first trial abruptly ended in a mistrial in January of 2012 after the defense argued that a juror had answered a prosecutor's question in a prejudicial way. After the second trial, which took place 7 months later, the jury found Young guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 25 to 30 years in prison, with state records listing an earliest possible release date of May 2033 and a maximum discharge date of May 2048. Speaking with ABC Australia following the verdict, McNichol's widow said that she didn't know why Young killed her husband, but that some people had told her that the defendant's money had gone to his head, making him feel like he could do anything he wanted and get away with it. Number 17. Jho Low. Back in 2015, the New York Times profiled Malaysian businessman Jho Low as an international playboy who partied with celebrities like Paris Hilton and outwardly enjoyed the fruits of his successful multi-million-dollar real estate investments. A lot had changed by later that year, with Low landing at the center of a $4.5 billion corruption scandal. Malaysian authorities are accusing Low of embezzling the bulk of the funds from the now defunct state-owned development company One Malaysia Development Berhad. He maintains his innocence, but has been on the run ever since an Interpol warrant was issued for his arrest in 2016. Investigators believe that Low initially sought refuge in Taiwan, which has no extradition treaty with Malaysia. His whereabouts remain a large topic of speculation, with investigative reporters Bradley Hope and Tom Wright claiming earlier this year that the fugitive businessman is hiding out in a mansion in Shanghai. During their podcast, Hope and Wright also asserted that Low is living under the name Konstantinos Achilles Weiss and using an Australian passport. Malaysian authorities are reportedly investigating the claims, and in the meantime, they've managed to recoup some of the country's lost assets. Number 16. Harold Landry. Tragedy struck the quiet English town of Pershore, Worcestershire, in early February of 2010 when 38-year-old Lucy Landry was found murdered in a neighbor's yard. She had been stabbed 23 times, and suspicion quickly befell upon her American millionaire husband, 65-year-old retired engineer Harold Landry. Harold had moved from Louisiana to Britain after meeting Lucy online. At the time of Lucy's murder, their marriage had grown cold, and they had both started dating other people. After killing his estranged wife, Harold went to his new partner's house and gave her tens of thousands of dollars worth of checks. He was arrested while driving home. Harold admitted to manslaughter on the grounds of sudden provocation while denying a murder charge. He was nevertheless found guilty of the latter charge following his trial, which took place a year after the crime. The convicted killer was sentenced to life with a minimum of 16 years, which means that he would first become eligible for parole at the age of 79. Number 15. Marlon and LaShonda Moore. Texas couple Marlon and LaShonda Moore rose to influencer status in the years leading up to the COVID-19 pandemic, depicting themselves as role models who had achieved success purely through hard work. But the pair hit a snag during the pandemic lockdown in 2020, since their income depended largely on socializing and networking at in-person events. To keep money coming in, the Moore started an investment program called Blessings in No Time, or BINT, which they promoted as safe, legal, and lucrative. They promised an 800% return on every $1,400 investment, along with a guarantee that unsatisfied customers could get a full refund. Many of BINT's early members received their promised returns, thereby convincing their family and friends to get in on the action. But it wasn't long before some investors failed to see their payouts, and they became increasingly angry as the Moores continued to flaunt their upscale lifestyle. Suspecting that BINT was an illegal pyramid scheme, authorities froze the couple's assets in 2021. In 2023, Marlon and LaShonda were sued by the government and charged in federal court with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and money laundering. They each pleaded guilty to one count of money laundering in January of 2025 and appear to be awaiting sentencing. Number 14. James Sullivan. Unaware of the danger that loomed, 35-year-old Lita McClinton Sullivan answered the door at her Atlanta, Georgia home in January of 1987 for what seemed like a package delivery. She was met by a man holding flowers, who pulled the gun and shot her in the head. Suspicion soon fell on McClinton's wealthy ex-husband, James Sullivan, who was able to prove that he was in Palm Beach, Florida, on the day of Lita's death, leading the authorities to suspect that he had hired a hitman to kill the victim. He utilized the vast resources available to him to avoid prosecution, however, and wasn't formally charged with Lita's murder until 1998, by which point he had fled to Costa Rica. From there, Sullivan traveled to Panama, Venezuela, and Thailand, landing himself at the top of the FBI's most wanted fugitives list. The international manhunt lasted for 4 years until he was finally captured in 2002. Long-awaited justice finally came in 2006 when Sullivan was found guilty at trial and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. In late 2024, news reports revealed that Lita's parents are attempting to retrieve money that they believe Sullivan hid before going on the lam in order to satisfy a $4 million civil lawsuit settlement that he has not paid them for. A judge has given the family extra time beyond the standard 20-year limit to look for the missing funds. Number 13. Loomes Wheeler Jr. In 2008, a multimillionaire named Loomes Wheeler Jr. fled the United States after being charged with the molestation of 2 female minors. With help from business associates, he cut off his ankle monitor and traveled by boat from Miami to the Bahamas, where he managed to fly under the radar for 6 years. He was finally captured in 2014 after being located in the Exuma Islands and was subsequently extradited to Osceola County, Florida to face trial. In 2015, a jury found the then 71-year-old businessman guilty of 7 out of 9 criminal charges. Wheeler was sentenced to life in prison, where he landed in additional trouble with the law later that year for attempting to hire a hitman to kill 6 people, including the prosecutor, judge, and law enforcement officers who had overseen his case. According to news reports, Loomes had offered an undercover agent $95,000 to fatally shoot the victims as soon as possible. He was charged with 6 counts of solicitation to commit first-degree murder, but he passed away before the case could be resolved. Number 12. Michael Skakel. Connecticut high school student Martha Moxley was just 15 years old when she was brutally murdered in her Greenwich neighborhood in 1975. She was last seen on the evening before Halloween at the home of her classmates, Thomas and Michael Skakel, who were the nephews of Robert F. Kennedy's widow, Ethel Kennedy. The next morning, her body was found beneath a tree in her family's yard with pieces of a broken golf club on the ground nearby. Moxley had been bludgeoned and stabbed to death with the club, which was traced to the Skakel residence. Suspicion initially fell on Thomas Skakel, whom Moxley had been seen kissing the night before. Shakel's father did what he could to prevent investigators from accessing Thomas's records, and no one was charged, despite investigators looking into other suspects and persons of interest. Finally, in 1998, a judge ruled that there was enough evidence to charge Thomas's brother, Michael, with Moxley's murder. Michael denied any wrongdoing, claiming that he was elsewhere on the night of the crime, but he was found guilty following a trial in 2002 and was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Shakel has been challenging his conviction and sentence ever since, arguing that prosecutors had deceptively misrepresented some of the statements he had made during the investigation. In 2020, state authorities announced that they would not retry Shakel, leaving him behind bars for the foreseeable future. Number 11. Alan Blackthorne. Sheila Belush was famously known as the Quad Mom for having quadruplets with her husband Alan Blackthorne, who made a fortune selling medical devices. But the marriage didn't last, and in 1989 the couple finalized an acrimonious and bitter divorce. Belush met a new partner and they moved to Sarasota, Florida to start a life together in 1997. But Blackthorne continued to stalk and harass Belush out of anger that she had won custody of their children. It was no coincidence that she was found brutally murdered 6 weeks later at just 35 years old. The killer had shot Belush and slashed her throat in front of her kids, and police were quick to suspect Blackthorne of being involved. He had an alibi for his whereabouts that day, leading to the suspicion that he had hired a hitman to do the job. Investigators learned that Blackthorne had offered to pay numerous people to kill Belush, and a man named Jose Luis del Toro later confessed that he had agreed to do it for $14,000. Blackthorne denied any involvement in the killing and tried pointing the finger at Sheila's new husband, but was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to 2 life terms. He died in prison in 2014 at the age of 59. Number 10. Krishna Maharaj. Before he was convicted of a double homicide, Krishna Maharaj was a wealthy British Trinidadian businessman who enjoyed a life of luxury in South Florida. His success came tumbling down in the late 1980s when he was arrested for the murders of businessmen Derek Moo Young and Derek's 23-year-old son Dwayne Moo Young, who were killed inside a downtown Miami hotel. Prosecutors accused Maharaj of targeting the Moo Youngs because they had bilked him out of more than $400,000, even though he had an alibi. He maintained his innocence but was nevertheless found guilty and sentenced to death. The sentence was later commuted to life without parole, but Maharaj continued to insist that he didn't even belong in prison in the first place. Finally, in November of 2014, he was granted a hearing to determine whether there was enough newly discovered evidence to overturn his conviction. While the judge acknowledged that the findings were intriguing, he ultimately ruled that the evidence fell short of proving that anyone other than Maharaj had committed the murders. Having lost his fight for freedom, Maharaj spent the rest of his life in prison, where he died in 2024 at the age of 85. Number 9. John Brooks. 57-year-old handyman Jack Reed met his untimely fate in Deerfield, New Hampshire, in June of 2005 when he was brutally beaten to death with a hammer inside a barn. Investigators traced the crime to multiple suspects, including 52-year-old Joseph Vrooman and 32-year-old Michael Benton, who confessed to their involvement in the murder. They said that they had been hired to kill Reed by multi-millionaire businessman John J. Brooks, who believed the victim had stolen property from him during a moving job 2 years earlier. In exchange for leniency, both men testified that they lured Reed to the barn and ambushed him, and that Brooks participated in the killing. During his trial in 2008, Brooks argued that he planned to only confront Reed and that he had no intention to kill the victim, but the jury found him guilty of capital murder, first-degree murder, and conspiracy to commit murder, landing him behind bars for life without the possibility of parole. Another suspect, Robin Knight, was also sentenced to life without parole, while Brooks' son, Jesse Brooks, received a 15 to 30-year term. He was paroled in 2023. Number 8. Jason Van Eman. Operating under the company name Weather Vane Productions, Jason Van Eman and his business partner, Benjamin McConley, produced independent movies, Broadway shows, and other entertainment. They funded their projects by raising money from investors, promising that the company would match their contributions. It sounded too good to be true, But some people took the plunge, and at first Van Eman and McConley made good on their word, but the company's projects failed to materialize, and Weathervane's once pristine track record deteriorated over time as the number of dissatisfied investors grew. In most cases, those who demanded their money back never received a refund, with Van Eman blaming bank compliance issues for his failure to repay the funds. Soon enough, civil lawsuits against the company began to flow in. At a time when Van Eman should have given up, he dug a deeper hole by continuing to defraud new investors and using the money to fund his legal defense. He also hired an online PR management firm in an effort to squash news of the growing list of allegations against him. But the ruse could only continue for so long before Van Eman and McConley faced accountability for what prosecutors described as a $60 million fraud scheme. In 2023, McConley pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud in federal court and received a 13-year prison sentence. Van Eman was found guilty of wire fraud and money laundering, resulting in a 21-year prison sentence. He'll be 65 years old when he's released. Number 7. Sammy Almahri. 28-year-old British student Nadine Aburas lost her life on New Year's Eve in 2014 when she was strangled to death in a hotel room in Cardiff Bay by her millionaire boyfriend, 44-year-old American businessman Sammy Almahri. After murdering Aburas, Almahri hung a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the hotel room door and drove the victim's car to Heathrow Airport, where he caught a flight out of the country. Almahri fled to Tanzania, where he was arrested on an Interpol warrant in January of 2016. Prosecutors accused him of murdering Aburas in a jealous rage after discovering that she was seeing someone else, while Almahri claimed that the voice of God had told him to kill the victim. The evidence showed that he had inflicted a campaign of harassment and abuse on Aburas prior to her death, often bombarding her with taunting messages and threats to post explicit photos of her online. After initially maintaining his innocence, Almahri pleaded guilty to murder in October of 2016 and was sentenced to a minimum of 17 years behind bars. Number 6. Manfred Schockner. While responding to a call about a suspected prowler in November of 2004, police found 50-year-old Lynn Schockner stabbed to death outside her Long Beach, California home. Officers arrived in time to catch the killer, Nicholas Harvey, who had been paid $5,000 to murder Lynn. The man who hired him, Frankie Jaramillo, had been paid $50,000 to arrange the hit by Lynn's estranged millionaire husband, Manfred Schockner, who wanted to avoid losing half of his $7 million fortune in a divorce settlement. Investigators implicated Manfred in the crime through wiretaps, bank records, phone records, and undercover surveillance. Jaramillo and Harvey were both convicted and sentenced to life for their roles in the crime, but Manfred adamantly denied any involvement in Lynn's murder, and the case dragged on for 3 years before he was found guilty at trial. Manfred continued to maintain his innocence even after he was convicted of the killing, instead blaming the police for not realizing that Lynn was being murdered while they surrounded her house and searched for the prowler. But his last-minute denial fell on deaf ears, and the then 67-year-old was sentenced to life without parole. Number 5. Barry Cadden. In late 2012, New England was plagued by a mysterious fungal meningitis outbreak which killed 64 people and caused 800 others to fall ill. Investigators traced the source of the infections to the New England Compounding Center in Framingham, Massachusetts, where patients had received contaminated steroid injections. About a month into the outbreak, authorities learned that the NECC had been operated in violation of its license by manufacturing drugs for broad use rather than filling individual prescriptions. 14 employees were charged in connection with the case, including the company's president, Barry Cadden, and its head pharmacist, Glenn Chin, who were named in a 131-count federal indictment related to the outbreak. Cadden, Chin, and other defendants were accused of knowingly sending out mislabeled, unsanitary, and contaminated drugs as part of a massive racketeering conspiracy. In early 2017, Cadden was found guilty of 57 charges and sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. He was also prosecuted by the state, and in 2024 he was sentenced to 10 to 15 years to be served concurrently with his federal sentence. Glenn Chin was sentenced to 10.5 years in federal prison for racketeering. In 2024, he pleaded no contest to 11 counts of involuntary manslaughter in Michigan, resulting in a prison term of 7.5 to 15 years. Number 4. Alex Mehr and Ty Lopez. In a recently filed lawsuit, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission accused e-commerce entrepreneurs Alexander Mehr and Taino Adrian Lopez of running a $112 million Ponzi scheme, according to court documents that were filed in September of 2025. The defendants bilked investors out of the 9-figure sum after they began buying out bankrupt retail giants like Radio Shack and Pier 1 Imports in 2019. Operating under the name Retail E-Commerce Ventures, the pair tried to rebrand the struggling businesses, which included the Dress Barn and Steinmart, as online-only shops. With thousands of retailers shuttering their doors, it seemed like an opportune time to cash in and turn the bankrupt brand names into profitable businesses. Authorities are now accusing Mehr and Lopez of misrepresenting their company's performance to hundreds of investors between 2020 and 2022. The duo also allegedly lied about using investors' money strictly for the specific venture that it was meant for, with no profits to pay interest, dividends, return payments, and other costs. They took out loans and cash advances, moved money around between different firms, and dipped into investor funds in order to cover those expenses. In the meantime, prosecutors say that the suspects squandered more than $16 million on personal purchases. The accused swindlers have not responded to media requests for comment. Number 3. Dawn Bennett. Before she turned to crime, 63-year-old Dawn Bennett was one of America's top-rated female financial advisors. She began misappropriating investors' funds after her radio show gained popularity, giving her an opportunity to capitalize on her good reputation. According to federal authorities, Bennett stole nearly $20 million from 46 investors, most of whom were elderly or retired, and many who had entrusted her with their life savings. Instead of using her clients' money as promised for her internet clothing business, she funded an indulgent lifestyle while lying to and misleading the victims in order to make them believe their investments were secure and that returns were guaranteed. In addition to using the money for her own benefit, Bennett used new investors' funds to pay previous clients, turning her operation into a de facto Ponzi scheme. Her unethical methods of doing business finally caught up to her in 2017 when federal prosecutors charged her with 17 financial crimes. In October of 2018, Bennett was found guilty on all counts, including conspiracy, securities fraud, wire fraud, bank fraud, and making false statements on a loan application. She was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release, with the records listing a projected release date of December 2033. Number 2. Lobsang Dargey. Former Buddhist monk Lobsang Dargey began a new life in the US in 1997 after escaping political turmoil in Tibet. He unapologetically clawed his way from the very bottom to an enviable position on the socio-economic ladder, marrying the sister of tennis legend Andre Agassi and relying on her connections and wealth as a cornerstone for his real estate empire. Dargey benefited from the federal government's EB-5 program, which provides incentives to immigrants who invest in a commercial enterprise that creates jobs in America. Much of his funding came from Chinese investors seeking to establish permanent residency in the US through their involvement with his projects, some of whom sold everything they owned in hopes of starting a new life in America. But much of the $240 million that Dargey amassed was diverted into failing businesses and personal projects that didn't qualify for the EB-5 program. He also squandered large amounts of money on personal purchases, including a Bentley and a sprawling mansion in Bellevue, Washington. The authorities eventually caught on to the fraud, and in 2015, Dargey was charged in federal court for his crimes. He pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts and was released from prison in 2019 after serving part of a 4-year sentence. And while many victims recouped their lost funds, nearly 300 investors' green cards were denied as a result of Dargey's crimes. Number 1. Ron Medich. 45-year-old Australian businessman Michael McGurk was killed with a single gunshot to the head as he pulled up to his home along Sydney's lower North Shore in September of 2009. The execution-style hit had reportedly been ordered by another wealthy businessman, Ron Medich, with whom the victim's relationship had soured after multiple disputes relating to their previous multi-million-dollar dealings. Prosecutors accused Medich of developing a deep-seated hatred of McGurk, whom he believed owed him money. Medich denied masterminding his business associate rival's murder, but he was nevertheless found guilty of the crime following a jury trial in April of 2018. He was sentenced to 39 years in prison with a non-parole period of 30 years, which means he'll be nearly 100 years old when he gains his first chance of freedom. 4 other conspirators were convicted of their roles in McGurk's murder and sentenced to various prison terms ranging from 2.5 years to a maximum of 10 years. Thanks for watching. Would you rather get $1 million today or receive $5,000 every month for the rest of your life, adjusted for inflation on a yearly basis? And why?